Hello, welcome. Good morning. It's good to be with you today. It is Monday, March 15th. This is Monday with Amanda. As you are hopping on, please say hi to me. Give me an emoji. Let me know how you're doing. As always, as you interact, then this video reaches out to more of the members in our group. More people can learn this really powerful information. I'm excited about today and our subject, ADHD, reflexes, and rhythmic movement. Now, we've been studying this book all month. Hi, Abigail. Good to see you. We've been studying this book all month. And this Friday, I will be teaching the sensory movement mini course. It's 2.0, so it's been improved. I'm teaching it with Candy Ueta, who is an occupational therapist. I'm excited to have her on the team and to be able to teach you an expanded amount of movements to help your kiddo, whether they have ADHD or are on the spectrum, have learning challenges or behavior challenges, focus challenges, or any of those things that make our kids uniquely wired. Hello, everyone. You might need to give me permission so I can see your name. Sometimes, Jen, I need you to give me permission so I can see your name here in the feed. So good to have you. Again, as you hop on, let me know how you're doing, how your day's going, and if you have a kiddo who has any attention challenges or has ADHD. Okay, I would love to know who you are and answer any of those questions today. I want to make sure that I explain how these sensory rhythmic movements develop the brain, mature the brain, and help our kids have better focus and executive functioning, right? That's the ability to really access the power of the prefrontal cortex to plan, work in a time frame, right? To be able to know what's going on inside of us and what's going on outside of us, and to be able to make the best choices possible, to be more responsible. Okay, I was just reading a comment. How's that? I see Jen's name. Thank you, Jen. Hello, everyone. Thank you for posting those. I know if you want to be tagged in the Mondays with Amanda, just let us know. In the announcement section, there is a post that you can add your name to, and we can get you on that tagged list so you for sure don't miss Mondays. All right. Hi, Mayrov. Good to see you. Okay. So in the comments, let me know if you have a child who has ADHD or ADD. I'd like to know who you are and if you have any questions that I might be able to help you with. Let me take a big drink. You guys got to see my monster drink. It's a half-gallon jar. I wanted to drink more water today, and so I filled that up so I knew that I was at least getting a half a gallon. All right. I'm excited about today because the more that I'm teaching this, it's so fun to understand it at a deeper and deeper level. So, I wanted to start off with here's kind of the list of what I'm going to go over today. Okay. And so we've got talking about ADHD and the similarity to small children, like kids who are between a year and a half, and how they exhibit ADHD tendencies. And I'll tell you why. And why for some of our kids and even adults, you might be an adult with ADHD. So let me know that as well. Why they're still, have these characteristics, okay? We're going to talk about the connection between low neurotransmitters, what those are, and an immature brain, right? We've been talking about this all month and how oftentimes our kiddos' brains are immature, meaning they don't have as many neural networks connecting all the different parts of the brain. So they're not able, it's not wired efficiently, and it's not mature to be able to help them really thrive in their life. So they have struggles. We're going to talk about the basal ganglia and the cerebellum, those two parts of the brain that are really integral to attention, executive functioning, and the ability to feel balanced and comfortable in our bodies. I've got a study to tell you about in the connection of reflexes to ADHD symptoms. Touch for a moment on the sensory system and how when the sensory system is not finely tuned or they're not getting enough of that input through movement with the sensory, how that attributes to behaviors that look like ADHD but might not even be ADHD. And then lastly, what can I do about it? What can you do about that? And I'm going to give you an invitation to participate in the workshop that's up on Monday. Okay, so let's start first off. I'm going to be working in chapters 2, 3, 4, and chapter 8. Okay, and I have a few things I'm going to read from here today. Sorry for the coughing. I'm almost at the end of my cold. And I want to definitely talk about environmental causes as well. I didn't put that on my list, but I did want to touch on how the environment can affect our kids and can create symptoms of ADHD as well. And I'm hoping that this is helpful for you. My brother-in-law and nieces have ADHD. I feel like OCD. Yes. So immaturity of the brain can also create OCD tendencies as well. Yep. Chapter 2, 3, 4, and 8. Thanks for posting that, Tiffany. If you want to post any ahas or the main things that stood out to you, I'd love to see those in the comments. It lets me know what things are resonating with you. If you have some free thumbs or hands, go ahead and write those thoughts that are standing out to you in the comments, and that helps other people as well. Okay, so let's talk about ADHD and small children. Okay, we see many times in kiddos that are, year to year and a half, tendencies that they can't sit still. They have a hard time focusing on anything for very long, right? These are all normal neurodevelopmental things. So for a 1-year-old or an 18-month-old child in that age range, it's pretty normal that they don't sit still very much, right? They're just going and going and going and going. And so what happens is when a child does not get sufficient input to connect their brain, especially their basal ganglia, with those nerve nets because of that input, then they can continue to exhibit ADHD behavior, okay, or even ADD behavior. So if you think about the last couple weeks, if you've been on here, and let me just to refresh you on this, when a baby does those programmed movements that are rhythmic, that are just natural movements that they make, what happens is that the brain picks up all the sensory information from that movement. So there's sensory like tactile. So how does the body feel while it's moving, right? And it uses the sense of balance, right? The vestibular system in that movement. The brain is getting that input, as well as proprioception, which is the ability for our brain to detect our muscles and joints and really where our body is in space. So those movements that these babies automatically make and small children make, they use sensory input to build nerve networks in the brain, okay? And when they don't get enough of that, enough input, number one, it's hard to get the cortex aroused. So those movements help arouse the upper portions of our brain. And that's called the reticular activating system. So these movements, number one, create arousal. And so if you have a kiddo that really didn't like to crawl or really doesn't like to move around, and if they're older, if they still don't feel coordinated or they don't like to move around much and they seem kind of sluggish and maybe low muscle tone, they could have low arousal, okay? Meaning their brain is not actively awake, and so it can cause symptoms of ADHD, right? Attention deficit without the hyperactivity. So we know that physical activity helps develop the brain at every single age, and it helps create new nerve networks. So any physical activity is very helpful for the brain. That's why movement breaks in classes between different subjects is so powerful. There was a study done with kids who had ADHD, and they did this study that they gave the child 5 minutes of input, of some movements, some exercises, and they were able to pay attention for 30 minutes after that 5 minute activity. And so that's one of the powerful things about movement and the brain and attention. Okay. So funny. Okay. The other thing is some scientists, some in the medical community say that genetically some people have low neurotransmitters, which would specifically dopamine in their brain. And dopamine is how it helps the communication in the brain. So if you have low dopamine, then that means the brain is not firing as efficiently or as quickly. And so children have attention deficit and oftentimes hyperactivity. Okay. So this is one way of looking at it, that it's a genetic lack of neurotransmitter. Another way to look at it, and Dr. Blomberg talks about this, and he's got some very strong opinions about stimulants for kids who have ADHD. He really believes that these movements are a natural way to mature the brain so that a child doesn't have to be on stimulants. That's something that obviously you're the expert for your family, but he definitely holds more naturalistic, holistic views on helping kids with ADHD, which I do as well, but I've done a combination of both things myself. So he talks about maturing the brain through these movements. Now, why does that help with that? So I want you to think about, it seems counterintuitive, but it takes so much maturity in the brain for us to be able to sit still or even to stand still. So let me give you an example of that. Think about when you're riding a bike. Okay, when you ride a bike, you actually can stay balanced better if you're moving. And so too kids have immature brains or not as finely tuned sensory systems. Movement keeps them balanced. And it's really hard for them to sit still because it takes a lot of brain connectivity to inhibit the desire for a body to move. Okay. And so think about trying to stand still or sit still on a bike, how hard that is to do, right? So too it's for kids to sit still in a chair, to listen to the teacher, to sit still in church, right? Or to stand in a line. These types of things are really difficult for some kiddos when their basal ganglia and their cerebellum are immature, meaning the nerve networks are not as efficiently and sufficiently connected. In the basal ganglia, this is where postural reflexes live. Okay. Right now, me sitting in this chair, keeping my head up, being able to rise up from my chair, all of that takes postural control. And some kiddos, if they still have active reflexes, primitive reflexes, which are the baby reflexes, they have a really difficult time sitting still because when they move parts of their body, it will trigger a reflex. Now, this is very, very subconscious, but it's happening. And so it makes it really difficult for some kids to pay attention because their body is being triggered into these these patterned movements when they're at school. If they're drawing over the midsection, right, over the midsection of the body, or if they turn their head this way, their whole body's going to want to turn, okay, which makes them look like they're constantly moving. And so we want to be doing input through exercise, through rhythmic movement to develop the nerve networks in the basal ganglia, as well as the cerebellum. Now, we've talked about the cerebellum, which is that bulge at the back, and it's connected to the brainstem. And it's one of the older parts of our brain. But it's really, really important. It's connected to the motor cortex. And its job is to make our movements smooth and coordinated. So think about your uniquely wired child. If they're kind of, you know, their movements aren't smooth, or they're not real coordinated, that's a real sign that these rhythmic movements could be really helpful for them, because they'll integrate the sensory system. Because sometimes our kids, their own balance system isn't finely tuned because they haven't gotten enough input for that to happen. And so these kiddos can be kind of clumsy. These could be kids who kind of space invade. They're in people's personal space and they don't recognize that because they can't actually feel their body in space very well. And so the cerebellum, as we do these movements, it integrates the sensory system. It actually has connections to the prefrontal cortex, okay, which helps with executive functioning as well as attention, right? And it also has a connection to the language center of the brain. And so there's been many clients who have been doing these exercises just for a couple minutes a day. And over the months, their child, especially those on the spectrum, their vocabulary is increasing, their expressive language is getting better, okay? Their ability to make connections and ask questions and see what's going on around them, as well as their social engagement with others, okay? There's so many benefits to these movements. I just can't say enough about it. Here's my big drink. Okay, let's see if you guys have any questions here. Can you repeat what causes OCD? So when our brains are wired inefficiently, if we have not gotten enough of those infant rhythmic movements to build up all the parts of our brain, things are going to be wired inefficiently. Okay? And it's been shown with some kiddos that have struggles with attention, even struggles with OCD. Okay, there's different opinions about where these things come from. Dr. Blomberg specifically believes that it is a lack of the connections in the brain. When there's more neural connections, it also creates more dopamine, which means there's more communication happening all over the brain. Okay, so as you build up these neural networks, more dopamine is created so that your brain runs more efficiently. Communication is happening, okay? So there's been kids, and he's worked with quite a few clients who had schizophrenia and other mental challenges that did these rhythmic movements that helped them more socially engage with their life, start taking care of themselves, where life just was going better for them. So this is really powerful for emotional challenges as well. Okay, so I'm not really telling you, and I can't really tell you what causes OCD because the medical community has some ideas, right? And the scientists have been doing things like that. This is his particular opinion about it. Okay, and he's a psychiatrist by training. All right, so let's talk about studies and the reflex. So I have a particular study I want to read to you guys real quickly. It's really short. And it's in the sensory movement mini course that I'm teaching on Friday, which I invite each one of you guys to join and come to that course. I'd love to have you. You will have these studies in the workbook. So it helps you kind of have the scientific basis behind it and the studies that have been done with movement, and sometimes some of them were rhythmic movement as well. Okay. So this one is really interesting about ADHD and reflexes. Okay. So this is an excerpt from the University of Western Australia. And it came out of the International Journal of Special Education. All right. It said that they basically found out that it resulted that generally, boys diagnosed with ADHD had significantly higher levels of reflex retention, meaning they had active reflexes, these primitive reflexes that should all be integrated by age 3 at the very latest. That it showed a significant higher level of these boys who had ADHD had reflexes that were still active. Okay. And this was for compared to boys that were not diagnosed with ADHD. And so it resulted, as indicated, both direct and indirect relationships between retention of the Moreau, the ATNR, the STNR, the TLR reflexes with ADHD symptomology and mathematic achievement. So they were measuring the boys' mathematic achievement and if they had these active reflexes, and they found a significantly higher portion of boys with ADHD had these active reflexes. And so the rhythmic movements help integrate those. When they're integrated, the basal ganglia becomes the guiding factor in the brain. So that's where those lifelong postural reflexes are. Okay, the ability to move our body from our own intention, right? These reflexes, primitive reflexes, once if we trigger them by movement, they just happen unconscious. Okay. Okay. I think probably me still. So somehow I popped myself out of my own video. I don't know how that happened. Okay, can you guys all see me now? Okay. I think so. Give me a thumbs up if you guys can all see me. Okay, great. That's weird. I turned off my own thing. Okay. So as these reflexes are integrated, the basal ganglia becomes basically the one in charge of the body. Okay. And so it has the natural postural reflexes that are unconscious, that keeps us straight, that, helps us catch our fall if we fall. It also keeps our eyes parallel with the ground so that when we bend this way, do you see how our head automatically moves to keep our eyes parallel? So that's a postural reflex that I'm not doing that. When I just lean this way, my head adjusts. My head doesn't go, I have to think about it to make it go straight this way. But if I just move, there's a postural reflex that moves the neck. Do you see that? So that's all controlled in the basal ganglia. And you're able to mature that through the rhythmic movement and the cerebellum. Okay? So the last part here I wanted to talk about, and I will answer your question. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Put it in the comments if you have any questions. The last thing is the sensory system. So first of all, we talked about if there's not enough maturity in the brain, it's really hard for kiddos to sit still, okay, to pay attention, or to be able to focus in school or at home or at church, right? The other part of this is the sensory system. So movement and sensory input are all intertwined, but I want you to understand the vestibular system. So the balance system in the inner ear, it's encased in the hardest bone in the body, and it's connected to the cochlea, which is our ability to actually hear. And inside the vestibular system, there's liquid and crystals, and it basically tells the brain where your body is in proportion to gravity. So whether your head's up or whether your head's to the side or whether your head's down. Okay. Now, if kiddos haven't gotten enough of that input through movement and the sensory stimulation, they might not have a finely tuned vestibular system, okay? Which means they're going to feel off balance, which means they're going to have a hard time sitting still, which means they might choose to, they might just fall out of their seat. So you're at school and you're like, why are kids falling out of their seats? That's a sensory thing. The other part is the proprioception. So if you have a child who has low muscle tone, when you haven't gotten enough input, physical input, rhythmic input as a baby, or if the reflexes are still active, many kids will have low muscle tone because they're not able to sustain their arms out. They get tired really easily, okay? And so rhythmics help build muscle tone in their body. And so the better the muscle tone is, the more reception that's going to be going to the brain to say, oh, I just flexed my arm, right? Or I can feel my legs and my body in space. Many kids are hopping in their seats because that helps them, their brain go, oh, okay, I know where my body is. So there's this underlying for some kiddos, if they don't really feel their body very well, they might be chewing on their clothes, they might be tapping their feet, right? Or moving in their chair constantly, because that helps their brain go, oh, I know where my body is, now I can focus. So some kids literally need to move to be able to focus. Okay. Now the rhythmic movements help integrate all of the sensory system. So over time, the goal and hope is that they don't have to constantly be moving to be able to learn and to focus. So that's one of the other powerful things about these movements. The sensory movements give that input, build the brain, connect it, mature it, so that they're able to learn better, to feel more in control of themselves. They have less outbursts, right? They feel like they know where their body is. They'll have a greater sense of well-being, because many of this stuff is below the conscious level. Child doesn't know that when they turn their head, their whole body moves. They just feel like it's really hard to ever write, and their hands are tired, right? Or they might have reflexes that are still awake in their hands. Okay. So the one thing I didn't mention about reflexes is there's a reflex in the lower back called the spinal galant. And it's one of the reflexes that can affect a child. So meaning their lower back is really ticklish. So these are the kids that don't like tags in their clothes, want really comfortable clothes. Oftentimes their lower back is really ticklish. So if you're sitting in a chair and you touch your lower back and your clothes kind of rub on it, it might make a child squirm. So that can also be seen as ADHD in kiddos when they just have an active lower back. Okay, and there's a way through the rhythmic movements and through integration to get that integrated. So the basal ganglia is the one in control of the body. Okay. Tiffany's asking about specific movements that help with different things. Yes. And many of the movements help with lots of different parts of the body or of the brain. Yeah. So we'll go over that in the workshop for sure. Okay, let's see. Do you guys have any questions for me about what we've covered so far? Have any of you started using these movements? And if you have, how is that going? Can adults benefit from these movements? Absolutely. I do these movements all the time to help calm my nervous system. That's probably the easiest way that I explain what the rhythmic movements do is they calm the nervous system. So if you need to pay a little bit more attention, if you need to calm yourselves down, these movements are powerful. They're really, really helpful for people who have Parkinson's disease. It helps to, again, build the neural networks. And I believe there's some studies around movement and Parkinson's disease, which is pretty amazing. A lot of times as we get older, we can re-engage those reflexes, and they can be causing some of our challenges or muscle or joint pain. So we can test ourselves to see if we have these active reflexes and then do movements to help integrate them. So at any age, this can help. And no matter if your child got enough of these or didn't, you can start now to improve your child's brain. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see if there's anything else. Any other questions? Jen says, I honestly don't know where we would be right now without them. Yeah, so Jen's had such a powerful experience with her son. She's been really consistent with those movements. Thank you for the reminder, Jen. Let's go over those wins. Announcements. Yeah, so we've got some awesome wins that we want to go over. Okay. And I will look here if you guys have any other questions, make sure that you put them in there. But let me share some. Let me share some from our announcements. So Jen says, super huge win. We went to the playground today to get out all that winter energy, and a kid from my son's class showed up. My son actually went over to him and grabbed his hand and pulled him to the playground and was actually talking to him. I was so excited, I cried. I'm amazed at the progress we are still seeing from the rhythmic movements even after all this time. Yeah, so Jen shared a little bit more about that her son's really never talked to a friend. Like there's been really little to no social engagement with friends. So the fact that he saw a little boy he knew, grabbed his hand, and they ran to play on the playground was kind of overwhelming to her. And she just started crying. And it was again another sign that the rhythmic movements are really, really helping to change and mature his brain. And that's such an exciting feeling. Gina Cooper said, my son had a perfect day at school. We are able to see more of what is going on so we can help him. Yeah, right. We're getting curious and looking below the surface at what's going on with our kiddos to help them reduce those stresses and teach those skills. So congratulations, Gina. Allie says the craziest thing happened Friday night. We were visiting with family, and my son, who really struggles showing affection, ran up to both my brother-in-law and father-in-law and jumped on them to hug them. He showed true enthusiasm and excitement that they were there. Prior to that, I had spent about an hour with him on the floor doing rhythmic movements and proprioceptive movements. #win. Oh, that's really awesome, Allie. That number one, that you're doing those movements with him, because I know it hasn't been really easy, because it's not always easy with some of our kiddos. So congratulations on doing those and then having that interaction with your family, right? So often our uniquely wired kids have a hard time even being, for some of them, they don't even want to be touched, right? And so that limits the connection with people, both socially and physically. So I'm excited to hear that. Tiffany Barton says, #win. My kids have been asking for the rhythmic movements. We call them RNs for short. It has helped each child in different areas. For my son, it has been relaxing his muscles so he doesn't have so much pain as before. It soothes him to sleep, and before school, it helps him be more attentive in class and not so sleepy. My 4-year-old daughter, it's helped with her self-regulation and anxiety. She used to have a tantrum if I left the room she was in, but now she is okay if I'm in a different room than her. We just do check-ins to help remind her that I'm still here. And my 3-year-old daughter still is in the process, but it helps with her sleeping and not getting up super early in the morning. Now that's a huge win, right? Kiddos that have a hard time going to sleep and then they get up really early in the morning. So these movements help kids calm their nervous system and to sleep better and to sleep longer for many of our families. So that's so exciting. I'm glad to hear that. Okay. Let's see. He says, the book explained how to test for reflexes. No, this book doesn't teach how to test for reflexes. But since you're in the coaching program, I'm happy to tell you how to do that. Yeah. So just let me know, and I can teach you how to test some of those for your child and for yourself if you want to. Tiffany said, "Yeah, I have money also because I started to have my own husband do them also. It helped calm my kids down. They are being more expressive. My 3-year-old's vocabulary is getting stronger." Oh, awesome. We usually exercise and have some seen progress with my son. Wonderful. Okay, so what can you guys do about it? Right? What you can do about it is sign up for the Sensory Movement Mini Course 2.0. That's this Friday. Now, if you can't make it on Friday, no big deal. You can have lifetime access to it. We're putting it on a new platform, so it's going to be really user friendly to look at each one of the movements. We've added additional things into the class. We're going to be talking about a bit of the science behind it, how to get yourself into a calm and curious place so you can help do those rhythmic movements. And just a reminder, you start with 1 to 2 minutes a day. That's it. It is not very long. And it's very simple to add it to your nighttime routine. Okay. This is something that'll be incredibly powerful. We teach you how to do the movements. Candy will be doing them live with her son during the workshop, so you get to see it live and ask questions. We'll also be teaching some poses that help with attention and help with integrating the sensory system. We'll also be teaching some other breathing methods that'll be really helpful, and methods to tap into the vagus nerve. So that's the nerve that helps upregulate ourselves so we can pay attention, and it also calms us down so that we can rest and digest. So I'm going to teach you some movements that you can do for yourself and with your child to help calm that nervous system that are different from the rhythmic movement. So it's the 2.0 version. There's packed with tons of amazing content, and I'd love to have you a part of it so that you guys can start having some of these amazing results with those movements. As you've heard from many other families, they're having incredible results. Okay. The movements have helped my husband with self-regulation, which is huge. He doesn't yell at the kids as much and has noticed how he feels more relaxed and not so tense. Yeah. I'm so excited to see what new things I can learn. Yes. In fact, I'm going to show you one right now that I think is pretty amazing. I've been studying a book called it's The Power of the Vagus Nerve, and their movements to do. And so I'm going to show you one of them right now, and I want you to try it with me. Okay. And I just want you to notice kind of first off how you're feeling. Okay. Because this is something you can do at any time to help calm your nervous system. If you're feeling nervous, to help shift that. If you're feeling anxious. Okay. So if you'll go ahead and sit in your seat, and we'll just, take a nice deep breath. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to gently just bend your head, your ear to your shoulder. You're not touching your ear to your shoulder, and you're just kind of gently pressing down without causing any sort of strain. And then the next thing you do is you want to look up and to the left. And for me, I'm actually can see my elbow, so I look toward my elbow without straining your eyes. This isn't something that you're trying to push toward. So you hold this position as you're looking up and to the left to your elbow for 30 seconds or until you swallow or yawn. And you should already start feeling a lowering of any anxiety and feeling more relaxed. Now, the significance of swallowing or yawning tells us neurologically that we're calming our nervous system because we're having more saliva in our mouth, so we have to swallow, okay, which is part of the digestive system. And so if we're in fight or flight, our body turns off the digestive system to send all the energy and resources to the extremities so that we can fight or run, right? So when we yawn, that's also indicative of relaxing ourselves. So if you don't yawn or don't swallow, not a big deal. Just hold that position for 30 seconds. Now we're going to do it on the other side. So bend to the right. Now for you, it's going to look like the left, but anyways, okay. And then you're going to look up with your eyes and to the right for me or the left to you. And I'm looking over at my other elbow. And you should notice just a calming of your nervous system. Okay. All right. Super simple. Um, I encourage you to practice that this week and let me know the results that you're having with it. So if you're feeling anxious or worried about something, I do that movement. It takes a whole minute, and I can immediately feel kind of like this downshifting in my brain. I feel a relaxation here in my shoulders. Okay. Oh, thanks, Candy. This is a good one. Salivating helps stimulate the vagus nerve, allowing it to pool in your mouth for a few seconds. Oh, that's good to hear. That's awesome. Thank you. I know you know a ton about eating. We've got to do a cool workshop on helping kids that have a hard time eating or they have limited food supply. Cool. Okay, so that is my invitation to you. I'm so glad that you guys showed up. If you have any other extra questions, I want you to practice this exercise so that you can feel your nervous system calm down. This is something that you can teach to your kids in your classroom or to your own family. It's super simple, really easy, and really consider joining the sensory movement mini course 2.0 that's going to come up on Friday. There's going to be a link. You'll see quite a few announcements this week about it because this is our last week to really for this push. We'd love to have you there and serve you however we can. I'm excited to teach next week on Mondays with Amanda. I'm going to be talking about autism, environmental causes, and rhythmic movements. And one of the things I'm just remembering that I forgot to tell you guys about was some of the environmental things that Dr. Blomberg talks about for ADHD kids. So I know I was just about to close this, but let me just mention a couple here, okay? I'm going to read a little thing. It's from page 43. And this is what he says. Okay, now obviously this is his opinion, and you do your own research, look your stuff up, but this is what he said. He says, never before have we lived in an environment as harmful to our physical and psychological health as we are today. Environmental pollution, mercury and other heavy metals, vaccines, unhealthy food with abundant sugar and other sweeteners, MSG and other food additives, and last but not least, increasingly intensive irradiation from mobile phones, mobile masks, computers, cordless phones, right? The internet, and our, well, how did he say it? And other cordless technologies are only some of the growing threats to our health. So I don't necessarily agree with every single thing in there myself, but what we do know is we don't know long-term effects that all of this technology has on our kids, right? This is the first generation where, 5 hours of the school day, they're on a computer. This has not happened ever before. So to think that there won't be any, effects would be really, ignorant to say. But to just pinpoint and say this is the problem, we don't know that yet. So we want you to be mindful of that, mindful of what your kids are eating has an effect on the inside of their body and neurologically, right? And so we'll talk a little bit more about that with autism. And gut health, right? There's a real connection to learning challenges and um, just some of the behavior challenges that our kids have and their gut health. If you were able to go to the Raising Uniquely Wired Kids Conference, we had a great speaker on there about that as well. So, anyways, just thinking about there is probably a connection from all this technology that affects our kids' behavior, affects their attention. I know you as moms already know this, and teachers and therapists. We know there's an effect. We don't know how much or too little. We're trying to figure that out with each one of our kids. But those go into play as well. Okay, last but not least, come to the sensory movement mini course this Friday. If it feels like your next right step, ask me any questions if you have them. And I will see you guys next week and probably in a few videos this week. Bye. You're welcome.